A little girl in a wheelchair spun slowly under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier, her eyes locked onto the man guiding her movements, her arms mimicking his imperfect rhythm. Her face, once lifeless for months, was lit with something no one had seen in that house for a very long time: joy. Then came the sound of footsteps, measured, cold, expensive. Jonathan Whitmore froze in the doorway of his grand living room. His tailored suit was untouched by the emotion flooding the room, but his eyes narrowed as he saw the man dancing with his daughter. "Step away from her," Jonathan said through clenched teeth. Doctor Malik Rivera, known to Jonathan only as his driver, didn't flinch. He stopped the music but gently let Emma's arms fall back into her lap, whispering something only she could hear. Her laughter didn't stop. "I said step away from my daughter." Emma reached out for Malik's hand, but Jonathan was already calling security. Within minutes, the man who made his paralyzed daughter smile for the first time in years was gone. What Jonathan never imagined was that firing him would unravel a secret buried deeper than money, pride, or prejudice, and it would cost him far more than just a loyal employee. Before Malik Rivera ever stepped foot into that mansion, Emma Whitmore had not spoken in 137 days. Doctors called it trauma-induced silence. Therapists used softer terms like withdrawal or emotional retreat, but Jonathan, her father, called it weakness. And weakness was unacceptable in the Whitmore household. The accident that confined Emma to a wheelchair had shattered more than her bones. It had taken her voice, her laughter, and her light. The child who once ran through the estate's rose garden barefoot now sat beneath the same windows, unmoving, eyes hollow. No amount of wealth could fix what had broken inside her. Jonathan refused to accept that he had flown in the top pediatric neurologists from Berlin, physical therapists from Switzerland, and a world-renowned behavioral specialist from Tokyo. Every treatment came with invoices that could fund entire hospitals. Every failure added weight to Jonathan's jawline, always clenched, always calculating. Yet Emma remained frozen in place, as if untouched by the empire built around her. One afternoon, against the advice of his estate manager, Jonathan hired a private driver, a Brazilian man named Malik Rivera. Overqualified, quiet, and polite, to a fault. His resume included degrees in medicine no one cared to verify. After all, he was not there to operate, just to open doors. The first time Malik saw Emma, she was sitting on the edge of the terrace, her head tilted toward the wind but not reacting to it. Her breakfast tray sat untouched. The staff had stopped trying. Malik did not speak. He simply sat on the stone railing a few feet away, saying nothing. On the third day, he brought a small music box from his car and wound it open. The melody floated between them like a question without pressure. Emma blinked. That was all. But it was more than anything anyone had seen in weeks. Word never reached Jonathan. Or perhaps it did, but he ignored it. He was too busy replacing another therapist, too focused on scanning progress reports for measurable change. In his world, healing had to come with metrics, with charts, with deadlines. Emma was not a project to Malik. He began arriving early, sometimes before sunrise, just to sit in the garden near her. He brought soft piano music, books with colorful illustrations, even stories about a little girl named Ava who loved butterflies. Emma never responded, at first. Then came the day she mimicked a fluttering hand gesture he made while describing a butterfly landing on a window pane. Just once. But it was unmistakable that it was Nurse Marlene who noticed. She found Emma copying the motion again hours later, and she alerted Jonathan immediately. She moved her hands, she said, breathless. On her own. Jonathan barely looked up from his call. And she was following Malik, not one of the doctors. Malik. That evening, Malik was summoned, not to the library, not to the study, but to Jonathan's formal office. The room was cold despite the fireplace, filled with portraits of ancestors and oil paintings of horses none of them owned anymore. "You were hired to drive," Jonathan said without raising his voice. "Not to interfere." "I did not interfere," Malik replied calmly. "I listened." The answer irritated Jonathan more than open defiance might have. He waved him off with a warning, but he did not fire him. Not yet. Over the next several weeks, something began to change. Emma began responding. Faintly, inconsistently, but it was there. A nod. A smile, a reach of the hand. She still would not speak, but she had started to dance. In her chair, arms moving to the rhythm Malik played each afternoon when Jonathan was not around, the staff whispered. Nurse Marlene wept silently once when she saw Emma laughing. Then came the afternoon Jonathan came home early. The music drifted down the hall before he even reached the living room. Laughter followed. When he entered, he did not see a disabled child. He saw betrayal, a stranger's hands on his daughter, a man he had never allowed to come that close. He did not ask for an explanation. He gave no second chance. Malik left without protest, no argument, no defense. But before leaving, he whispered something to Emma that no one else could hear. And Emma, fragile, broken, and long silent, held onto his hand like she was losing oxygen. The driver was gone. The mansion returned to silence. But something inside Emma had already woken up, and something inside Jonathan, though he did not know it yet, had just begun to fall apart. Rain tapped gently against the windows as Malik packed the last of his things. From the small room above the garage, he moved with quiet hands, folding his clothes carefully, as if rushing might disturb something sacred. Downstairs, the mansion echoed with silence. No music, no laughter. Emma had not smiled since he left the room. She had refused lunch. She would not answer the nurse. She stared at the door like she was waiting for someone to walk back through it. Jonathan believed he had done the right thing. He told himself that boundaries mattered, that hiring a driver was never meant to become anything more than a practical choice. But deep down, the image of Emma dancing in that chair, arms moving, face glowing, kept returning. He tried to push it away. He told himself it was manipulation. She was not smiling because of him. He told his reflection the next morning. She was smiling because progress was finally happening. But the truth stayed heavy in his chest that a few days later, a package arrived. No name on the envelope. Just a note. She asked me to send this to you. Inside was a flash drive. Jonathan plugged it into his office computer without expecting much. The video began with a close-up of Emma in her wheelchair. She was in a medical office, bright and clean. She wore a blue sweater and had her hair tied back with a ribbon. She was moving her arms again, gracefully this time, following soft piano music playing in the background. Her face lit up as Malik stepped into the frame that he stood to the side, giving gentle instructions, guiding her through the motions without touching her. At one point, she closed her eyes and began to move on her own. The camera stayed on her face. She was not just moving. She was happy. Underneath the video was a message typed in simple black font. She recorded this last week. When she still believed. You loved her more than your own pride. That Jonathan's hands froze on the mouse. His throat tightened. He watched the video 3 times, then 5'd up by the 6th. Something cracked inside him. He had not just fired a driver. He had pushed away the only person who had reached his daughter's heart. And worse, he had done it out of pride, out of fear, out of the quiet, invisible prejudices he never believed he had. He opened a locked drawer in his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside was an investigation report he had quietly ordered on Malik Rivera days after hiring him. At the time, he told himself it was normal to run background checks. But what he had found shocked him. Malik had once been a licensed pediatric doctor in Brazil, that he had studied medicine at top universities. His credentials were real, his experience deep. He had once led recovery programs for trauma-affected children. Then suddenly, he disappeared from the medical world. 5 years, ago, and no arrests. No scandals, only one record, a daughter named Ava Rivera. Deceased, Jonathan leaned back in his chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. When the sun began to set, he stood up, grabbed the report, and walked out. Across town, Malik sat quietly on the balcony of his small apartment. A framed photo rested beside him on the table. His daughter Ava smiled back at him from a rocking chair, frozen in time. That he whispered softly, "One more, my little one. We will save one more." A knock at the door broke the silence. When he opened it, Jonathan stood in the hallway, wet from rain, breathing heavily, the file shaking in his hand. "You planned this," Jonathan said. "From the start." Malik stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Whitaker. I trusted you with my daughter," Jonathan snapped. "And you used her to fix something broken inside yourself." Malik did not respond at first. He walked to the table and picked up a letter, worn, yellowed, folded many times. I made a promise, he said. To your wife. A promise you never knew about. Jonathan stared at the letter. Claire, she asked me, before she passed, to be there if anything ever happened to Emma. Because she knew you would not be ready. She knew you would fight everything that did not fit your idea of control. Jonathan's hands trembled as he opened the letter and recognized Claire's handwriting. Richard, if Malik is giving you this letter, then you are fighting the very help I begged you to accept. Stop trying to fix Emma. Start loving her. Let Malik help. He lost his child, but he can save ours. Jonathan sat down slowly. He had not only failed as a father, he had ignored the dying wish of the woman he once promised to protect. And now, the only man who truly understood Emma was walking away. Unless something changed, Jonathan begins to uncover Malik's true identity and past. Jonathan Whitaker was not the kind of man who could leave a mystery untouched, especially not when it challenged his sense of control. After Malik's dismissal, something kept nagging at him. The man had moved with too much grace, spoken with too much clarity, and carried himself in a way no ordinary driver ever did. It was not just Emma's reaction that haunted Jonathan. It was Malik's calm eyes, his steady tone, his ability to disarm a child's pain with nothing but presence. Something was off, and Jonathan was going to find out what. He poured himself a drink that evening, pacing the marble floors of his study, then sat down at his mahogany desk. One simple background check should have done it. But Malik Rivera was not in the employee database, not under his company's records, not in the driver pool. It was like he had never been hired officially. That was impossible. He called his assistant. I want every piece of paperwork on Malik Rivera. Now, within an hour, a thin manila folder landed on his desk. Education records. Service history. None of it ordinary. Former pediatric surgeon. U.S. Army Medical Corps. Honorable discharge. 2 medals. 3 countries served. Fluent in Spanish, Arabic, and French. Jonathan blinked. What was a man like that doing driving a car in silence? The next page told more. Malik had lost his license to practice medicine after speaking out against mistreatment at a hospital in South Carolina. Whistleblower. Patient advocate. Political noise had pushed him out. He had been blackballed quietly, but thoroughly. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, face stiff. A surgeon. That explained the way he had moved. The way he had watched Emma, not with pity, but precision. He had known what he was doing. Why did you not tell me who you were? Jonathan muttered under his breath. It started to sting. Not just the guilt, but the realization that he had pushed away the one man who had connected with Emma after years of failed therapies and cold doctors. And worse, Emma had grown quiet again. She was not eating properly. Her sleep had become restless. When asked what was wrong, she only whispered, I want to dance again. The household, once touched by Malik's silent kindness, now felt hollow again. Jonathan stood before Emma's bedroom that night and watched her from the doorway. Her tablet sat on her lap, open to a paused video, Malik dancing with her. She kept replaying it over and over. The staff had noticed too. One of the housekeepers approached Jonathan privately the next morning. Sir, I know it is not my place, but that man did something none of us could. Emma was happy, truly happy. Jonathan dismissed her, but the seed had been planted. He returned to his study, opened the folder again, and stared at a small note tucked in the back, a recommendation letter from a child cancer survivor, handwritten in blue ink. Dr. Rivera is the reason I can smile today. He saw me when no one else did. Aiden B., age 11. Jonathan pressed the paper flat on the desk and closed his eyes. Why had a man like that chosen silence over revenge? Why had he never tried to prove his worth, never mentioned who he had been? And what kind of man had Jonathan become to fire him without asking a single question? That night, Jonathan made a decision. He was going to find Malik Rivera again, not to hire him back, not yet, but to understand the full truth of who he had been and what else he might be hiding. Because somewhere deep inside, Jonathan had started to fear something else. He had not just fired a driver, he may have driven away the one person who could save his daughter's spirit, and maybe his own. Emma tries to walk. Jonathan begs Malik to return. It began with a whisper, a soft shuffle of movement that barely reached the hallway. But Maria, Emma's nurse, heard it first. She rushed to Emma's room and gasped. The child who had once refused to leave her bed was standing. Emma's tiny hands were gripping the side of her dresser, her legs shaking with the effort. Her brow was furrowed, her lips pressed tight in concentration. "Emma, what are you doing?" Maria called out, half panicked, half stunned. Emma did not respond. She took a trembling step forward, then another, and then collapsed to the ground with a soft cry. Maria darted in and lifted her gently, her voice full of tears. But Emma only whispered one word: "Malik." News spread through the mansion like lightning. Jonathan was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone rang. He ignored it once, twice, but the third time, something told him to answer. Maria's voice was breathless. "Sir, you need to come home. It is Emma." She tried to walk. Jonathan's world stopped. By the time he arrived, Emma was asleep in her bed, a warm blanket tucked around her small frame. But her face was different, determined, alive in a way he had not seen in years. He sat beside her, his hand trembling as it brushed her curls off her forehead. "Why did you try to get up?" he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to say, "Because he told me I could. He said, if I dance with the music in my heart, my legs will listen one day." Jonathan's heart broke open. That night, he stood alone in his study, staring at Malik's file once more. But this time, it was not suspicion in his eyes. It was regret that he had seen wealth, power, scandals, but he had never seen a man quietly carry such greatness and pain all at once, and walk away from both. And yet, Malik had not asked for anything. Not recognition, not forgiveness, only Emma's trust. Jonathan picked up the phone. "Find him," he told his head of security. "I do not care how long it takes. Bring him to me." It took 3 days. Malik was found volunteering at a free clinic downtown, quietly tending to undocumented patients who could not afford hospital care. He wore a faded shirt and had a stethoscope around his neck, his hands steady, his voice calm. When the Blacktown car pulled up, he did not flinch. That he walked out and stood silently as the window rolled down. Jonathan was inside, his face pale, his pride buried beneath humility. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "And I know I have no right to ask, but Emma tried to walk. She said it was because of you." Malik did not speak. Jonathan stepped out of the car. "I need you to come back. Not as a driver, not as a servant, but as someone who understands her in a way I never have. She needs you. I believe. I do too." Malik looked at the man who had once dismissed him without a second thought. "I am not a savior," he said. "No," Jonathan agreed. "You are something far rarer. You are honest." There was a long pause. Then Malik asked, "Is she safe?" "She is better than she has ever been," Jonathan replied. "But she will not be whole until she knows you did not abandon her." Malik's eyes softened. "I never would." Then he nodded. "I will come, but this time on my terms." Jonathan did not argue. When Malik walked through the doors of the mansion again, something shifted. The staff smiled. The silence lifted. And Emma? She beamed. She did not run to him. Her legs would not allow it yet. But she raised her arms and whispered, "I knew you would come back." Malik knelt before her, placed a hand gently over hers, and said, "I promised, remember? We are not done dancing yet." The mansion becomes a healing center for children. The seasons changed. The air around the mansion no longer felt cold or heavy. Laughter, once a stranger to the estate, now danced freely through its marble halls. Malik stood near the rose garden, where Emma had once tried to take her first steps. She now walked beside him, slow but steady, holding a clipboard in her hands. Her eyes shone not with sadness, but purpose. What was once the Whitmore estate was now called the Willow Haven Center. It was no longer a symbol of power, but of possibility. Children from all over the state arrived. Kids in wheelchairs, kids who had forgotten how to smile, kids who had only known pain. They were greeted not by nurses in cold uniforms, but by caregivers who knelt down to their level, called them by name, and offered warm hands instead of pity. Emma, wearing soft blue instead of pearls, led the center's therapy programs. She had become the heart of the mansion, her smile giving the place its new rhythm. Jonathan, too, had changed. He no longer barked orders. He listened. He sat in on story circles, learning from children half his size. Once driven by legacy and control, he now found peace in watching children laugh in the same ballroom where he once held his business galas. Malik? He never wore a badge, but he became the soul of the center. He taught the children how to move to music even if their legs could not. He taught them that strength was not loud, it was steady. The local press started to notice. They wrote articles not about wealth or inheritance, but about healing. "The billionaire who gave his mansion away," read one headline. But those who visited knew the truth. Jonathan did not give it away. He finally understood what it was for. On quiet evenings, Malik would sit by the piano in the grand hall. Emma would rest beside him, sketching plans for new therapy rooms, while children played in the courtyard beyond the open windows. "I thought I built this place to last forever," Jonathan said once, standing near the door. Malik looked at him with calm eyes. "Now it just might." 2 years later, Emma inspires others. Jonathan speaks truth publicly. 2 years had passed. The once lonely mansion had become a beacon. News crews, school buses, and families from all over visited Willow Haven. But the real change was not in the building. It was in the people who had walked through its doors. Emma stood on a stage at a national youth wellness conference, holding a microphone with steady hands. Her cane rested quietly against her chair. Behind her, a screen played images, children smiling, painting, dancing, learning to walk again. "My name is Emma Whitmore," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I used to believe my body was broken. I used to think I had no voice. But someone believed in me when I could not even look in the mirror. And now, I stand here not just for myself, but for every child who has been told they are not enough." The room erupted in applause. Some stood, some wiped tears. Back at Willow Haven, Malik watched the broadcast with a quiet smile, seated among children playing with therapy dogs. He never needed the spotlight. Seeing Emma shine was enough. But that night, another voice spoke too, one many had not expected. Jonathan Whitmore took the podium at a charity gala. The same ballroom where he once closed million-dollar deals now held teachers, social workers, and parents of children with special needs. He looked around the room, took a breath, and said, "I spent most of my life building walls. Tall ones, strong ones. But I built them to keep the world out. And in doing so, I almost lost what really mattered." People fell silent. "My daughter taught me that courage does not wear a suit. It wears braces and falls down 10 times and gets back up 11. And a man named Malik showed me that true strength does not shout. It listens, it lifts, and it forgives." There was no applause at first, only stillness. Then, slowly, the room rose in a standing ovation. From that day on, the story of Willow Haven was not just about recovery. It became a movement, a reminder that healing is not always about medicine. It is about love, patience, and the courage to change.